You wake up one day and suddenly feel late. Not late by the clock, but late compared to everyone else. Someone your age is already making money. Someone younger is already successful. And without anyone saying it out loud, you feel this quiet pressure pressing down on you. You need to become something fast. You tell yourself it's ambition. You tell yourself it's responsibility. But what if it's not? What if the real reason you feel like you have to succeed early has nothing to do with success at all? Think about this for a second. A man in his mid-20s, working a normal job, paying his bills, not failing, but not winning either. On paper, he's fine, but inside he feels restless. He scrolls through social media, sees people his age, driving better cars, living bigger lives, and suddenly his chest tightens. It's not just jealousy. It's something deeper. It feels like he's falling behind in a race he never agreed to run. So he pushes harder, works longer, sleeps less, not because he clearly knows what he wants, but because he's afraid of what it means if he doesn't get there fast enough. This is where it gets uncomfortable. According to Sigmund Freud, most of what drives human behavior doesn't come from conscious decisions. It comes from the unconscious. Buried fears, early experiences, silent beliefs that were never questioned. So when a man feels this intense urgency to succeed early, it might not be a rational choice. It might be a reaction, a response to something deeper that he doesn't fully see. Maybe it started when he was younger. Maybe he heard things like you need to be strong, you need to provide, or don't be useless. Maybe he saw how people treated men who didn't have money or status. Maybe he learned, without anyone sitting him down and explaining it, that his value would always be measured by what he achieves. And once that belief settles into the unconscious, it doesn't just disappear. It becomes a silent rule, a hidden script running in the background of his life. So now, every time he slows down, he feels guilt. Every time he rests, he feels like he's wasting time. Every time he compares himself to someone more successful, he doesn't just feel behind, he feels like he's losing worth as a person. That's why the pressure feels so intense, because it's not just about success. It's about identity. It's about proving over and over again, I am not a failure. But here's the question no one really asks. What happens if you remove that fear? If no one was watching you, judging you, comparing you, would you still rush the same way? Would you still feel this urgency to succeed early, or would your pace change? Most people never stop to ask that. They just keep running because stopping feels dangerous. Slowing down feels like losing. And that's the trap. When your drive comes from fear instead of clarity, no level of success ever feels like enough. You reach one goal, and instead of peace, you feel temporary relief, followed by another wave of pressure. Another comparison. Another invisible deadline. You're not chasing success anymore. You're chasing the feeling of being safe from judgment, from failure, from that quiet voice in your head telling you you're not enough yet. So before we talk about whether men should or shouldn't succeed early, we need to understand something deeper. The real question isn't, why do men need to succeed early? The real question is, what are they afraid will happen if they don't? Because once you see that clearly, everything changes. The pressure, the urgency, the constant need to prove yourself, it all starts to make sense. And more importantly, you finally get the chance to decide whether you're running towards something meaningful or just running away from something you've never faced. Let's be direct. The pressure you feel right now, the urgency to succeed early, to move faster, to not fall behind, it didn't start today. It didn't come from this week or this year. It's been building quietly inside you for years, long before you ever called it ambition. And if you're honest, it doesn't even feel like a choice anymore. It feels automatic, like something is pushing you from the inside. Picture this. A man is sitting alone at night after work. Nothing dramatic happened. He didn't fail. He didn't lose his job. But there's this constant tension in his chest. He opens his phone, scrolls for a few minutes, and sees someone his age announcing a new business, a new car, a new level of success. Instantly, something shifts inside him. Not just comparison, something heavier. A quiet thought appears. I'm behind. And that one thought is enough to ruin his peace. He doesn't question it. He doesn't ask where it came from. He just accepts it as truth and pushes himself harder the next day. But here's the uncomfortable part. That thought, I'm behind, is not a fact, it's a belief. And most beliefs like that don't come from logic, they come from somewhere deeper. According to Sigmund Freud, a large part of human behavior is driven by the unconscious mind, the part of you that stores old experiences, emotional memories, and unspoken rules about how the world works. Which means when you feel pressure to succeed early, it's not just because of what's happening now, it's because of what has been silently shaping you for a long time. Think back, even if it's just for a moment. Growing up, what did you learn about being a man? Maybe no one explained it directly, but you saw it. You saw that men who had money were respected, men who didn't were ignored. You heard phrases like, be strong, don't be weak, you need to take care of your family. And even if those words were said with good intentions, your mind translated them into something more absolute. If I don't succeed, I don't matter. That belief doesn't sit on the surface. It sinks deep into the unconscious, where it quietly starts controlling your reactions. So now, as an adult, every situation gets filtered through that hidden belief. When you see someone more successful, it's not just information, it's a threat. When you're not progressing fast enough, it's not just a delay, it feels like failure. Even rest starts to feel dangerous because somewhere inside there's a voice saying, if you stop, you'll fall behind. And if you fall behind, you lose your value. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt guilty for resting? Not tired, guilty. Like you should be doing more, achieving more, moving faster. That feeling doesn't come from reality. It comes from conditioning, from a system inside you that was built long ago without your awareness, and now it runs automatically. Here's another example. Two men are in the exact same situation, same age, same income, same level of progress. One of them feels calm. He knows where he's going, and he's okay with the pace. The other feels constant pressure, anxiety, and urgency. Same reality, but completely different internal experiences. Why? Because one is reacting to the present while the other is reacting to his unconscious programming. And this is where most people get stuck. They think the solution is to work harder, push more, achieve faster. But if the pressure is coming from the unconscious, then no amount of external success will fully solve it. You might silence it temporarily, but it always comes back because the root of the problem isn't your progress. It's the meaning you've attached to your progress. So when you feel like you're running out of time, pause for a second. Ask yourself, is this really about time or is it about fear? Fear of being judged, fear of being left behind, fear of not being enough. Because once you start seeing that clearly, something shifts. The pressure stops feeling like a command you have to obey and starts looking like a signal you need to understand. And that's the real starting point. Not working harder, not rushing faster, but becoming aware of what's actually driving you. Because until you see that, you're not chasing success, you're being chased by something you don't fully understand. Let's not soften this. From a very early age, men are taught, directly or indirectly, that their value is not who they are, but what they produce. Not their character, not their emotions, not even their intentions, but their results. And once that idea settles into your mind, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It becomes the standard you judge yourself by every single day. Think about how different the expectations are. When a man struggles, people don't usually ask how he feels. They ask what he's doing about it. When a man fails, the sympathy is short-lived and the pressure to fix it shows up almost immediately. When a man succeeds, that's when he gets recognition, respect, even attention. Over time, your mind starts connecting the dots. Achievement equals value. No achievement, no value. And here's where it becomes dangerous. Because this isn't just a conscious belief you can easily challenge. According to Sigmund Freud, repeated experiences and expectations like these don't just stay on the surface, they sink into the unconscious. They become automatic. So now, even if no one is actively judging you, it feels like they are. Even if no one is comparing you, you start comparing yourself. You don't need external pressure anymore because you've internalized it. Imagine a man in his late 20s. He has a stable job, a decent income, nothing is collapsing. But when he meets someone new, one of the first things he worries about is, what do they think of me? Not as a person, but as a man. Does he make enough money? Is he successful enough? Is he impressive enough? And if the answer feels like no, even slightly, something inside him shrinks. His confidence drops, his energy changes, and suddenly he feels like he needs to prove himself. Now compare that to a different situation. The same man is in a room where no one knows his job, his income, or his status. Notice what happens. There's discomfort, a subtle anxiety, because the usual way he defines his value is gone. He can't rely on achievements to feel enough, so he feels exposed. That's how deep this conditioning runs. It shapes not just what you do, but how you experience yourself. Let's be honest here. Have you ever introduced yourself and felt the need to mention what you do, almost as if it validates your existence? Have you ever avoided conversations because you felt like you hadn't achieved enough yet? That's not coincidence. That's programming. A silent rule inside your mind saying, if I don't have results, I don't deserve recognition. And once that rule exists, everything becomes a race, not necessarily against others, but against time. Because if your value depends on achievement, then the earlier you achieve, the sooner you feel secure. The sooner you can stop questioning yourself. That's why the idea of success early feels so powerful. It promises relief. It promises identity. It promises that once you reach a certain level, you'll finally feel like you're enough. But here's the part most people don't realize. That feeling doesn't last. Because when your value is built on external results, it's always unstable. There's always someone doing better. There's always a higher level. So even when you succeed, the mind doesn't relax. It raises the standard. What used to feel like success now feels average. What used to feel like enough now feels lacking. So the pressure continues, not because you haven't achieved anything, but because the system itself is designed to never feel satisfied. And this is where you need to pause and ask a different question. Not how do I succeed faster, but why do I feel like I need to prove my value in the first place? Because if you don't question that, you'll spend your entire life chasing something that never fully gives you what you're looking for. The truth is, the belief that your worth equals your achievement was never something you consciously chose. It was absorbed, repeated, reinforced, and now it feels like reality. But it's not reality. It's a lens, a perspective you've been looking through for so long that you forgot it can be changed. So when you feel that urgency again, the need to be more, do more, become more, don't just react to it. Look at it, question it. Because maybe, just maybe, the real problem isn't that you haven't achieved enough, but that you were taught to measure yourself in a way that can never truly be fulfilled. Let's go deeper. You think you're afraid of failing financially, losing money, missing opportunities, not making it in time. But that's not the real fear. The real fear is much quieter and much more personal. It's the fear of what failure says about who you are. Not what you have, but what you are. Picture this clearly. A man loses money in a business. Objectively, it's just a financial loss. Numbers went down, plans didn't work. That's all. But inside him, it doesn't feel like numbers. It feels like identity. He doesn't just think, I made a mistake. He thinks, I am a failure. And once that thought takes over, everything changes. His posture drops, his confidence disappears, his voice gets quieter, not because the situation is irreversible, but because his sense of self has been shaken. This is where things get dangerous, because when failure becomes personal, you stop seeing it as feedback and start seeing it as a verdict, a final judgment on your worth. And once that happens, every risk feels heavier, every delay feels threatening, every comparison feels like confirmation that you're not enough. According to Sigmund Freud, the human mind is structured in a way that protects the ego, the part of you that holds your identity, your sense of who I am. When something challenges that identity, the mind reacts strongly, not logically, emotionally, defensively. That's why failure doesn't just disappoint you, it hurts you. Because deep down, your ego has tied your achievements directly to your identity. Let's break this down with a simple example. Two men start the same project. Both of them fail. One says, that didn't work, I'll try again differently. The other says, I knew I wasn't good enough. Same outcome, completely different interpretations. Why? Because one separates failure from identity, while the other fuses them together. And if you're honest, most men fall into the second category. Not because they want to, but because that's how they've been conditioned to think. When your value has been linked to your performance for so long, it becomes almost impossible to separate the two. So every time you fail, it doesn't feel like an event. It feels like exposure, like the world just saw something you were trying to hide. Now think about how this connects to the need to succeed early. If failure threatens your identity, then the sooner you succeed, the sooner you feel safe, the sooner you can protect your ego, the sooner you can say, I've made it, I'm not that person anymore. That's why the urgency feels so intense. It's not about ambition, it's about protection. But here's the problem. When you chase success to protect your identity, you give success too much power. You make it responsible for your self-worth. And the moment you do that, you lose control because now your confidence depends on external outcomes. Your peace depends on results you can't fully control, and your identity becomes fragile, constantly at risk of being shaken by the next failure. Let me ask you something directly. When things don't go your way, do you criticize your actions or do you criticize yourself? Do you say that decision was wrong or do you say I'm just not good enough? That difference matters more than you think because one keeps your identity intact while the other slowly destroys it. And once your identity is unstable, you start overcompensating. You push harder, you take on more pressure, you rush timelines, not because it's the smartest move, but because you're trying to escape that feeling of not being enough. You're not just working towards success anymore, you're working against your own self-doubt. This is why so many men burn out, not because they're weak, but because they're fighting the wrong battle. They think they need more success, more discipline, more effort, but the real issue is deeper. It's the belief that their worth is always on the line. So before you chase the next goal, pause. Ask yourself honestly, if this fails, what will it mean to me? Not in terms of money or time, but in terms of identity. Because if your answer is, it means I'm not enough, then the problem isn't the goal. The problem is the meaning you've attached to it. And once you see that clearly, something shifts. Failure stops being a threat to who you are and becomes information about what you're doing. You stop protecting your ego and start developing it. You stop rushing to prove yourself and start building something real. Because the truth is, you were never afraid of failure itself. You were afraid of what it would say about you. And once you separate those two things, you don't just become stronger, you become free. Let's be honest about something most people won't say out loud. Success, especially early success, often isn't just about achievement. It's about relief. It's about finally quieting that voice inside your head that keeps asking, am I enough yet? And the reason it feels so urgent is because that question never really stops unless you find a way to silence it. Think about how it works in real life. A man spends years grinding, long hours, constant pressure, pushing himself beyond what feels sustainable, not because he has a clear, deeply thought out vision, but because he needs to get somewhere fast. Then one day he hits a milestone. Maybe it's money, maybe it's status, maybe it's recognition. For a moment, everything feels lighter. He breathes differently. He stands taller. That internal pressure disappears temporarily. And in that moment, he tells himself, this is it. This is what I needed. But notice what happens next. A few weeks later or a few months later, the feeling fades. The relief disappears. And without realizing it, the pressure comes back, just in a slightly different form. Now the goal is bigger. The standard is higher, the urgency returns, so he pushes again, works harder, chases the next level, not because he's fulfilled, but because he remembers that brief moment of relief and he wants it again. This is the cycle, and it's more psychological than people think. According to Sigmund Freud, much of human behavior is driven by the need to reduce internal tension. That tension, whether it comes from fear, insecurity, or unresolved emotions, pushes you to act. And when you find something that temporarily reduces that tension, your mind starts associating it with relief. In this case, success becomes that solution. So now success isn't just a goal, it becomes a coping mechanism, a way to manage discomfort, a way to escape that underlying feeling of not being enough. And the earlier you achieve it, the faster you get that relief. That's why the idea of success early feels so powerful. It promises an end to the pressure. It promises peace. But here's the reality no one explains. If success is only reducing your internal tension, not resolving it, then the relief will never last. Because the source of the tension is still there. You haven't addressed the belief, the fear, or the identity issue underneath. You've just covered it up with results. Let's make this practical. Imagine two men reaching the same level of success. One of them pursued it out of genuine interest, curiosity, maybe even enjoyment. The other pursued it out of fear, fear of being behind, fear of being judged, fear of being less. On the outside, they look identical, same achievements, same status, but internally they're completely different. The first man feels stable. He can slow down without panic. He can enjoy what he built. The second man, he can't stop, because stopping means the pressure comes back. The silence becomes uncomfortable. The thoughts return. So he keeps moving, not because he wants to, but because he has to. Now ask yourself honestly, when you think about success, what do you actually feel? Or pressure, curiosity, or urgency? Because those emotions reveal your real motivation. If it's pressure and urgency, then there's a good chance you're not chasing success, you're chasing relief. And there's nothing wrong with wanting relief. The problem is when you rely on external achievements to give it to you, because that puts you in a position where your peace depends on constant progress. You can't slow down. You can't rest. You can't be satisfied, because satisfaction would mean the chase ends and the mind isn't used to that. This is why so many people reach levels they once dreamed of and still feel empty. Not because success is meaningless, but because they expected it to fix something deeper, something internal, something that success was never designed to fix. So before you tell yourself you need to succeed faster, pause for a second. Ask a different question. What am I actually trying to feel? Is it freedom? Is it respect? Is it security? Or is it just the absence of that constant internal pressure? Because if you can identify that, you stop blindly chasing outcomes and start understanding your own behavior. And once you understand that, everything changes. Success is no longer a way to escape discomfort. It becomes a choice, something you pursue with clarity, not desperation, something you build, not something you hide behind. Because the truth is, success can give you many things: money, options, opportunities. But if you're using it to quiet a voice inside you, it will only ever work temporarily. And until you face that voice directly, you'll keep running, not toward success, but toward the next moment of relief that never quite lasts. Let's confront the part no one likes to admit. Chasing success early can look powerful from the outside, but inside it can quietly become a trap. Not because ambition is wrong, but because when it's driven by fear, it starts costing you more than it gives back. And the most dangerous part, you don't notice it at first. It feels like progress. It feels like discipline. It feels like you're doing the right thing. Imagine this. A man wakes up early, works all day, and pushes himself at night, repeats the cycle every single day. On the surface, he's focused. He's committed. People might even admire him. But if you look closer, there's something off. He can't relax without feeling guilty. He can't enjoy his achievements without thinking about the next step. Even when he wins, his mind immediately asks, "What's next?" There's no pause, no satisfaction, just continuous motion. This is where the hidden cost begins to show. Because when your drive is coming from an internal pressure you don't fully understand, it doesn't turn off. It doesn't say, "That's enough." It keeps pushing, even when you've already reached a point that should feel like success. According to Sigmund Freud, unresolved tension in the unconscious doesn't disappear on its own. It looks for expression. And if achievement becomes the outlet, then you'll keep chasing more of it. Not because you need it, but because something inside you hasn't been resolved. Let's make this real. Have you ever noticed how some people finally reach the level they once dreamed of, and instead of feeling fulfilled, they feel empty? It doesn't make sense at first. They have the money, the recognition, the lifestyle, but internally something is missing. That's not because success failed them. It's because they expected success to solve something deeper, something emotional, something psychological. Here's another example. Two men are working toward the same goal. One of them can take a break, step back, enjoy the process. The other can't. Even when he tries to rest, his mind keeps racing. He feels like he's wasting time, like he should be doing more. That second man isn't just motivated, he's trapped in a loop where slowing down feels like falling behind, and falling behind feels like losing value. And over time, that loop creates consequences, not just physically, but mentally. Burnout doesn't happen because you work hard. It happens because you work under constant pressure without internal balance. When your mind never feels safe enough to stop, your body eventually pays the price. Fatigue builds up, focus drops, motivation turns into exhaustion, and ironically, the thing you were chasing, success, starts slipping further away. But the deeper cost isn't even burnout, it's disconnection. Disconnection from yourself, from your purpose, from what you actually want. Because when you're always reacting to pressure, you don't have time to ask meaningful questions. You don't stop to think, is this what I truly want or is this what I think I need to prove? You just keep moving. And the longer you do that, the harder it becomes to tell the difference. Let me ask you something honestly. If you reached your next big goal tomorrow, completely fully achieved, would you feel at peace? Or would your mind immediately search for the next target? Because your answer to that question reveals everything. If peace only exists after the next achievement, then peace is always one step away, and that means you'll never actually arrive. This is the hidden danger of chasing success early without understanding your own psychology. You think you're building a better life, but you might be building a system where your value is always conditional, where you're only allowed to feel good about yourself when you're progressing. And the moment you slow down, doubt comes back in. So, what's the alternative? It's not about giving up ambition, it's about changing the source of it. Instead of chasing success to escape pressure, you start building from clarity. Instead of proving your worth, you express it. That shift sounds small, but it changes everything. Because now, success is no longer something you need to feel okay. It's something you choose to pursue. And once that shift happens, something surprising occurs. You still work hard, you still aim high, but the pressure feels different. It's not heavy, it's not urgent in the same way. It's focused, controlled, sustainable. You're no longer running because you're afraid. You're moving because you know where you're going. Because the truth is, chasing success early isn't the problem. The problem is when you believe that without it, you're not enough. And as long as that belief is driving you, no level of success will ever feel complete. Let's shift the direction completely. Up to this point, you've been looking at success as something you need to reach, something that will finally prove your value, silence your doubts, and give you peace. But what if the real power isn't in reaching success? It's in understanding what's been driving you the whole time. Because once you see that clearly, something changes immediately. The pressure that used to feel like a command starts to feel like a signal. Instead of blindly reacting to it, you begin to question it. And that's where control begins, not by forcing yourself to work harder, but by becoming aware of what's actually pushing you. According to Sigmund Freud, when unconscious patterns are brought into awareness, they lose some of their power. They stop controlling you automatically. And this is exactly what most people never do. They stay on the surface, chasing goals, adjusting strategies, working harder, without ever looking at the deeper layer that's driving all of it. So let's make this practical. The next time you feel that urgency, the need to move faster, to achieve more, to not fall behind, pause for a moment. Not to stop your progress, but to understand it. Ask yourself a simple question. What am I actually feeling right now? Not what you're thinking, but what you're feeling. Is it excitement, or is it anxiety? Is it curiosity, or is it fear? Because those two paths lead to very different lives. Imagine two men working toward the same goal. One of them is driven by interest. He enjoys the process, he learns, he adapts. If he fails, he adjusts and continues. The other is driven by fear. Every step feels urgent. Every delay feels dangerous. If he fails, he questions himself, not just his strategy. From the outside, they might look the same effort, same direction, but internally, they're completely different. One is in control. The other is being controlled. Now, here's where the shift happens. When you start recognizing your internal state, you gain a choice. You can still pursue success, but you're no longer doing it blindly. You're no longer reacting to invisible pressure. You're acting with awareness. Let me ask you something directly. If no one was watching you, no one was judging you, no one cared about your results, what would you still choose to pursue? Would it be the same path you're on right now, or would it change? That question cuts deeper than it seems, because it separates what you truly want from what you feel you need to prove. And this is where real control begins. Not in controlling your actions, but in understanding your motivations. Because when you understand why you're doing something, you can decide whether to continue or to change direction entirely. This doesn't mean you slow down or lose ambition. In fact, it often makes you more effective because now your energy isn't wasted on internal conflict. You're not constantly fighting yourself, doubting yourself, or trying to silence that voice in your head. You're aligned, clear, focused. Here's a simple example. Before, when you worked, it might have felt like pressure, like something you had to do to avoid falling behind. Now it feels like a decision. You still work hard, but the emotional weight is different. There's no panic behind it, no desperation, just intention. And that changes everything. Because sustainable success doesn't come from constant pressure, it comes from clarity and consistency. When you're not driven by fear, you make better decisions. You take smarter risks. You recover faster from failure. You're not just reacting, you're building. So instead of asking, how do I succeed faster, try asking, what is actually driving me right now? Because if the answer is fear, insecurity, or the need to prove something, then speeding up won't solve it. It will only amplify it. But if the answer is curiosity, growth, or genuine interest, then your progress becomes stable, sustainable, real. And this is the difference most people never realize. They spend their entire lives trying to control outcomes without ever understanding what's controlling them. But once you turn your attention inward, once you start observing instead of reacting, you step out of that cycle. Because in the end, success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about how you achieve it and what it does to you in the process. If you lose yourself chasing it, then no outcome will feel like enough. But if you understand yourself while pursuing it, then even the journey becomes meaningful. And that's the real shift. You're no longer running because you're afraid of being left behind. You're moving because you've chosen a direction, not out of pressure, but out of clarity. Let's bring everything back to one simple, uncomfortable truth. The question was never really, why do men have to succeed early? The real question has always been, why does it feel like they have no choice? Because once something feels like a necessity instead of a decision, you stop questioning it. You just follow it. You run, you push, you chase, without ever stopping to ask whether the direction is actually yours. Think about how this plays out in real life. A man reaches a point where, on paper, he should feel proud. He's doing better than before, earning more, progressing. But instead of satisfaction, there's still this quiet pressure sitting in the background. It hasn't disappeared. It's just shifted. Now the goal is bigger, the timeline is tighter, the expectations are higher. And the strange part is, he can't even explain why he feels this way. He just knows he can't slow down. That's the moment most people miss. Because they assume the solution is to keep going, to push harder, to reach the next level faster. But if you've been paying attention, you already know that approach doesn't end the pressure. It feeds it. Because the pressure was never about the level you're at. It was about the meaning you attach to it. According to Sigmund Freud, when something operates from the unconscious, it feels real, immediate, and unquestionable. You don't see it as a pattern, you see it as truth. So when the thought appears, I need to succeed early or I'll fall behind, you don't analyze it, you react to it, you accept it, and that's how it keeps controlling you. But here's where everything changes. The moment you recognize that this pressure is not an absolute truth, but a learned response, you create space. Space to pause, space to question, space to decide. And that space is where your freedom begins. Let me ask you something directly, one last time. If you stripped away the fear of judgment, the fear of comparison, the fear of not being enough, what would your pace look like? Would you still rush the same way? Would you still feel this constant urgency? Or would you move differently? More intentionally, more deliberately, more in control? Because the answer to that question reveals whether you've been living by choice or by reaction. This doesn't mean success is unimportant. It doesn't mean you shouldn't aim high or work hard. It means you need to understand why you're doing it. Because when success is driven by fear, it will always feel urgent, heavy, and never quite enough. But when it's driven by clarity, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a direction, not a pressure, a path, not a race. Look at it this way. Two men can walk the same road, reach the same destination, achieve the same results. But one arrives exhausted, still searching for validation, still feeling like he has more to prove. The other arrives grounded, clear, and at peace with what he's built. Same outcome, completely different experience. And the difference wasn't in what they did, it was in what was driving them. So the real goal isn't just to succeed early, it's to succeed consciously, to understand the forces inside you instead of being controlled by them, to choose your pace instead of being pushed by invisible pressure, to build something real, not just externally, but internally. Because at the end of the day, success without self-understanding is unstable. It can be taken away, compared, overshadowed. But when you understand yourself, your fears, your motivations, your patterns, you gain something much stronger. You gain control. And with control comes a different kind of confidence. Not the kind that depends on results, but the kind that stays with you regardless of them. So don't just ask yourself how fast you can get there. Ask yourself whether there is even where you want to go. Don't just chase the next level. Understand what's pulling you toward it. Because once you see that clearly, you're no longer trapped in the cycle of proving yourself. You're finally in a position to define yourself. And that's when success stops being something you have to reach and becomes something you create on your own terms.